Hello. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you all for coming here. Um, I have to say that, first of all, I found myself putting together this PowerPoint presentation, thinking that I wanted to not depart from a previous one that I had, and I just kind of spiced it up a little, but I started altogether from scratch, and I was quite happy that I had to do it that way, because I realized I could probably, first of all, say something for myself, standing in front of you, but also the fact that I have this large-scale exhibition now at Wheels somehow had this little effect that I didn't exactly see coming, and that was something I appreciated. I will, of course, not present the material of the exhibition, because I would hope that you could go and see it, and that's really not what I'm here for. For once in all these years in Brussels, I arrived in Brussels in 2003, and for once I have added that topic of conversation to my life. Now I can talk about my work as it is exhibited in the city that I live in. And this is something that I couldn't do for a very long time, although I've been working in Brussels, and Brussels has no doubt had an impact on the way that I work and my life in general. I almost had a reputation for never exhibiting here, so now this has changed, and I realized as I was putting together these images that this is one of the ways in which it has changed. Sure enough, there are some images of works that you will see in the exhibition, but that's not all. I have a bunch of images to show you. I tried to somehow make a chain of images and gestures, because in a sense, my main point here, I know that not all of you are in the arts course, but if there's anything that I'd like to leave behind as a practicing artist to an audience of art students or young artists, is simply the fact that that there's a way to keep working on an idea, which is not, or a series of ideas, which is not a linear development, but more of a series of lines that you can go forwards and backwards again. You will see that I put together some images of works that maybe have something in common that I have gone back to and then pushed forward again, and then had time to reassess, and then come back to again. As I was saying earlier in the in the chat we had with the curatorial studies people on one side and the sculpture students on the other, the good news about being an artist is that the career is hopefully a very long one, and anything that happens in 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line is, if we are all lucky, something much better than we, or much richer than we could envisage. Things happen a little quicker these days because of the pace that everyone's life has. But I'd also like to think that being an artist is a way to somewhat allow oneself to slow down a little. Not slow down in one's pace or appreciation, but somehow slow down and prioritize depth a little bit over speed. Another thing I want to say is I think it's in everyone's interest that this becomes more of a conversation. I have no paper to read, I have no treatise to put forward. I will just go through a series of images with a few comments. Stop me anywhere that you want to know, anything particular, even titles, dates, or any comment that you may have. Thank you. And I think that's the way we can make it work the best. I was, of course, in art school myself, and I studied first in Mexico from 1988 to 1992, and at that same time I was that I was in the National Art School, mainly doing mainly doing drawing and print. I chose not to take any of the workshops there because I thought the teachers of painting and sculpture were a little bit conservative. So mostly I was there for the workout, for training the eye, for learning to draw. And thankfully, there was a very good core at that. And this is a discipline that I've carried with me my entire career, and I hope for the rest of my life. And by this discipline, I mean the discipline of drawing. Drawing not as a strictly life drawing, but as giving form to thought, and the possibility and the urgency of actually doing that every day is something that I think I was really fostered by my years in that art school. At the same time, I was also going once every week to the workshop of an older peer, of Gabriel Orozco, with some 3 other guys of roughly my age, Abraham Cruz Villegas, Damian Ortega, and Jerónimo Lopez. And we made some sort of study group, spontaneously evolved into a really great companionship, and this is something that we've carried through since. This was again in the late 80s. After that, I went to London to do a postgrad in Goldsmiths in the mid 90s, and I was saying earlier that things have changed since then. That was somewhat at the threshold of globalization, and I think many of the huge amount of changes that were brought about by globalization and this apparent flattening of a lot of fields have, of course, impacted the art world. I remember back in that day that the idea of a nomadic artist, an artist that was traveling and working on the road, was taken on with a lot of enthusiasm by curators who organized exhibitions about this very notion of, oh, wow, now artists can actually, they don't need to be in the studio anymore. They can be traveling and working while they'll travel. It's funny that it seems like such an old-fashioned idea now. It's almost today, if you are not traveling all the time, you cannot call yourself an artist. We haven't quite got there, but it almost feels that way. So I think, yes, with globalization and the internet, certain things have just taken on a speed that we never thought would be the case. And one of them has, of course, been art education. Now that there's so much connectivity between art schools all over the world, I think there are some ways in which this has become standardized and professionalized in ways that I'm sure you're talking about pretty much constantly. And I'd be happy to exchange some of your points if you wish. But anyway, as I said, I'm going to show a few images. This one is of a piece that's in the show at Wheels. And I find it that this is the third time that I ask the collector to lend it for one of my survey exhibitions, and it becomes some sort of axis right in the middle. In this case, it's not physically in the middle, but I find it that because of this axial shape that it has, it works as that, and also because of the circular motion that it implies in the way that it's conceived. I call it the empty cardboard box. Empty cardboard bin, and it is basically what you see. It could be an already segmented rubbish bin that contains somewhat uselessly separated the inner dividers of cardboard boxes. So I thought this embodies a lot of what my practice is about, which involves a lot of circular motions in which gesture may cancel out function, or function may cancel out material, or image may cancel out volume, etc. I find myself, I really wasn't trained as a sculptor. I was trained more making images. This was, the late 80s. I was making paintings with words, and I was really interested in the semantics. So even back then, I thought, I'm not interested in paint nor the canon of or the canons of the history of painting. I'm interested in conveying meaning. And of course, with a painting, the great thing about it is I felt, as I guess a lot of you do, you can paint whatever you like. You just have a blank canvas and you can, it sounds a little simple, but I thought there were other media that at least at the time were a little bit more about themselves. If we follow that McLuhanian idea of the medium is the message, I thought painting had long left that premise, and then I felt painting was quite a liberating discipline. And then, of course, I did it because I was interested, as I said, in conveying meaning. I was not back then, and I'm not now, somewhat out there to churn out products. Ultimately, my practice is just a meditation on my passage through life. It sounds a little grand, but that's what it is. And I make sculptures now. This is a piece of 2009. This is a more recent work that, as you can see, is a stainless steel box. I call it, is more or less this size. And then it has one of those cups that you find on self-service restaurants, where you find either the straws or the salt and the sugar, except it's on the side and it's got this other element inserted there. Then I go back to an older work that is a weatherproofed cube. This I made in Brussels, and I've started working with this material here in Brussels. Well, there in Brussels. And around the same time I made this one, which is a meditation on the cube as well. This, I was invited to an exhibition called The Infinite Cube, and I thought, okay, how do we do this? A piece that is both about the notion of infinity and the notion of the cube. So I made a cube that's weatherproofed. So in a sense, it has this unsurmountable threshold between the outside and the inside. And then it's somehow stepping on a bag with a can of coconut juice. And then around the same time, I made this work that is the 6 sides of a cube, except that they're turned outside in somehow, and then pressing 2 cans. And these 2 drink cans you may also recognize from your life here. I only work with what's around me. I'm not out there really to invent any fantastical scenarios or reach out to exotic products that come from far away. Normally, I like to just make work with what's around me. This is somewhat a piece about typologies. You have 3, 1, 2, 3, left to right, small to large, or large to small. And then what's inside these bins is actually the void. I found a way to make the bottom completely seamless. So when you look down into these bins, you look down into the abyss. And I am keeping this somehow in a freeze frame by keeping it cool. This work is, I think, 2010 maybe, and then I go back to 2004. This is one of my few kinetic works. I don't know quite how I did it, but I managed to find a way in that these fridges that have a very slight suction system, they kept these bags somehow hovering and very slowly flying up and down. More of these cubes, again with this impression that I pick up from daily life. As I was traveling in the train, I think Eurostar or Thalys, I really liked it how the people that are selling coffee, they have this, their banknotes accessible, color-coded, just you immediately understand. They're there at hand's length, and they are like this, classified like this for a practical reason. So very often I travel through life, and when I see one of these impressions, I pick it up, I record it, and I try to recreate it, in one of my artworks. So most of what you will see, if you see an exhibition of mine, is quite possibly things that you've seen yourselves, hopefully seen from a different angle. But as I said, I'm not trying to invent situations of fiction, but rather to work with reality. This is another material that I picked up in Brussels, this insulating roll that you use under laminated floors. And after a lot of trying, I worked out, because of its consistency and its weight, a way to tie it against the wall with either the weight, with the tension created by the weight of two objects on both ends, or just tying it and making it cross in the middle, like in this case. And as I was saying earlier, there are ways in which my gestures come back, even though the pieces may be of a different nature, of a different weight, of a different ambition. I find it that I'm often making objects hold other objects. I had this piece of slate in my studio in Los Angeles when I lived there for like 2 years. I didn't know what to do with it. I just really liked it when I saw it. And I kept it there until one day I realized I had to repair somehow, restore the only two broken negative spaces. And so I inflated 2 condoms and I restored it there. This piece is in the exhibition as well. And then we have some more of these positive, negative space, ripples, consumer objects. Simulacra, I guess. This work is also in the exhibition. It's called Extra Safe, and it's titled after the kind of, again, there's an inflated condom that's nestled into the asymmetric middle between these 2 objects. And the title comes strictly from the product that I used, which is the Extra Safe condoms. And I thought of it as a piece about demography. It comes from an exhibition I did at South London Gallery in 2011. And one of the nice things of making these survey exhibitions is that you can transport these little bits of other contexts into a new context. And then, of course, works get to dialogue with one another in ways that you never really expected. As we also know, no sooner you're putting the last piece of an exhibition, you're already running to do something else. And very often, the only way to deal with your work, to experience it, is by looking back and bringing it back into the present. That's why I like it that you can somehow always bring back older works into new situations and see them again for what they really are or what they really were. This material, for instance, very common in the United States, impossible to find anywhere else. Simple technology, just balance, roll, fold, clip. My work hardly ever plugs on the wall. I've never made a moving image. I would like to think that I can work with anything that's around me, but that doesn't mean that I will try everything. I've never made a video, for instance, and I'm not sure that I ever will. And I guess many of my pieces are, in fact, meditation on technique. I love technique and trying to work out how things work, or how things were made, or how things were put together, or how things are just about to fall apart. So very often my practice is this, like trying to keep something against the wall or balance it or this or that. Pretty simple, I would say, modest experiments in physics that I most often do by myself with my own proportion, with my own weight, with the size of the door frame. So very often my works have that scale to them. And yeah, taxonomies are important for me. I decided to put a few of these images. Some of you may be familiar with this work of the Berlin Biennial of 2008 that I called Items in Care of Items. And it consisted of 4 metal sculptures, really robust metal sculptures that were taking the place, the function of the coat check in the Neue National Gallery in Berlin. So basically it all began by displacing the function of something in that building and assigning that function onto the misuse, let's say, of the sculpture. So basically when you walked in the very early morning, the piece was there waiting, but there was no art. In a sense, it only began when people started arriving, and I knew that they would have to check their coat in because it was in the autumn. So this was not something that I imposed onto the audience. I just kind of channeled that necessity onto a collective sculpture. So you left your jacket or your bag or anything you wanted to leave in custody, and in return for that, you got a little magnetic disc with a number, and then after you saw the exhibitions, you claimed it back. So the piece was in constant change. This gesture was somewhat found a new iteration on this other exercise I did in an art fair that I knew was, of course, a place with a great influx of people. And I knew that a lot of people smoke, of course, and there would be certain points at the edge of the basically at certain entrances that people would smoke their last drag, or maybe actually go out and have a smoke and then come back in. So I knew that there would be ashtrays right in these spots. So again, a bit like with the displacement I proposed with the previous work I showed you, I took the ashtrays away and I put sculptures instead. So it only took 1 or 2 people to stub out their cigarette, and then the rest was kind of a collective effort. This is, of course, the entrance of the art fair. And then, yeah, you had a group of smokers that were working with me. And the rules, let's say, of this piece were not handed out in a printout. No one forced anyone. I like to think of that the rules for this piece, let's call it a game, are in fact the shapes. If you see, you know, a nook or a little slot somewhere, it sometimes invites you. It gives you that urgency to maybe put your ticket there, or to leave, you know, that bit of rubbish that you don't know what to do with. And if you look around, that's maybe already happening. Like underneath your chair, you manage to wedge in your book or something like that. This is part of the meditation that I'm constantly trying to observe. So it's really the shape that I thought would invite this, rather than the imposing or the spelling out of the rules. And when I say rules, I think that there is somehow, in an artwork, there's often like an unwritten contract between the piece and the audience. And the piece would hopefully find a way of spelling out its rules, how the piece wants to be engaged with and interpreted, hopefully not too wide and too relative that it becomes not engaging, but hopefully also not too imposing, that then the reading of the piece becomes very narrow. As a spectator, I like to go to exhibitions and really get the feeling of that I can understand how the piece invites me in, and it's somewhere I want to be, and I want to do something for it, and I want to help it somewhat convey its meaning. That is an umbrella dipped in concrete. And this, I believe, came after this. This you will see in the exhibition at Wheels as well. This I call it concrete pie, and again, it comes from an idea. It's somehow the embodiment of an idea. Concrete you can think of as the opposite of literal, or the opposite of metaphoric. But you can think of it also concrete as in the material. Cement and gravel makes concrete. And maybe by now you realize I'm also interested in this aesthetics of infographics, of the way often facts and figures are rendered visible with shapes and charts and figures. This piece is also in the exhibition at Wheels. And as I said, very often I reach into these little spaces. And that's where it all happens. My little collection of plastic straws. I'm having a very hard time now finding replacements for these, because of course we know that plastic straws are just as bad as human invention gets towards the environment. But of course I want the artwork to live long, so now I need to look after this rather polemic or embarrassing aspect of its conservation. Often the works, as I was saying earlier, come from a modest act of balancing. This is a little less modest, it's very heavy, of course. But nevertheless, I like to think of my lighter works and my heavier works in the same way. The gestures are the same. And as I said, speaking in front of an audience of students, I would only, if there's one thing that I'd like to leave, is the fact that one has to keep pushing forwards and backwards and sideways, and really try to take everything, push everything up until its furthest consequences. We have paper with printed information, but it's also a body. It's a message, of course. It's an image of itself. It's also a method to keep moss damp, where I come from. When you go and buy moss for your nativity scenes, you quite often get it sandwiched between sheets of newspaper. So of course, my meditation is it really the physical aspect of the paper, or is it the information printed? So I decided I'd make a new version of this impression that I was exposed to, but only with the financial newspaper. Because I thought the world of finance is all about vertical structures and that kind of osmosis as well. So, as I said, I work with paper and found bits of information, just like with found bits of ready-made objects or consumer articles. I don't really see a categorical distinction between what's really, really manufactured and mediatized and what is seemingly on the other end of the spectrum, closer to a raw material. I think it's just a matter of degree. Some things are more fondled with and more codified, and some are less. But the fact that we bring anything into an exhibition space, I think already implies so much context and so much codification that anyone who begins to talk about nature in a raw or pure state in an exhibition space, I have my doubts. And yes, part of my ordering principles often involve color coding. This is a piece I made at the Common Guild in Glasgow once, and it's called The Balance Between the Foreseeable and the Invisible. And it all started with my love for the MasterCard logo and the Maestro logo. And then the idea that these shapes stand for these systems that are all kind of balancing or tumbling. And then I just padded the whole thing with sleeping bags. Then a little further down the line, I made this one. It's just a concrete sandwich. And yeah, it keeps appearing in different ways. We've got one more of these. This is also a work in the wheels exhibition. And yeah, ordering principles are important in my work. They're not the only driving gesture, but surely one that I always go back to. I collect stuff, I bring it into the studio, but not really in an obsessional way. I don't have piles and piles of things that I don't know what to do with. I try to have a little bit more of a stricter sense of selection before anything goes into the studio. And then sometimes things lie about for years, and I don't know what to do with them until one day comes and I think, okay, this is a piece about obtuse and acute angles. Because of course what makes a good door wedge has to do with that being able to fit into a very compromised space. And then I saw this other table, this other kind of table, to place suitcases in customs situation in the airport. And I really like these ridges that are right angle. So I thought, why not? Metal, of course, sometimes is soft and crinkly. This piece is called Quick Standards. And then I have a series of these images because I often find that I've made a lot of works, most of them in Brussels, of sculptures that stand near the wall. Maybe it's because of the kind of studio that I had. Quite often I have light coming from one side and I have a nice wall that I like to see things against. And I found that a lot of my work has actually had this structure somehow of like things aligning with the wall behind. This one's called Waiting, Giving, Spent. And part of it comes from my fascination with public toilets and the beauty of stainless steel contraptions. So you can probably work out that the smaller ones are the ones that are commercially available, and the much larger ones are ones that I actually had enlarged. But they have the exact same finish. This is something I wanted to say as well. I like to think that I can present my work and that it's very important for it to have a great degree of realism and to be very convincing. I would rather people not start wondering how it was made and whether it was made efficiently enough. I would rather the spectator feel that it was there, that they just found it, they're standing in front of it. Like if you stand in front of that chair, you probably think, okay, the design is clever, but maybe don't stop too long to think, oh, well, the varnish is not properly applied or this or that. You just, it's there and it has a function and you engage with it in that way. Often that is what I want from my sculptures, although they may feel like they didn't quite exactly came from a shop, that they also have that factualness about them. Sometimes, of course, I have to pair these objects with others in what may feel like an unlikely marriage, but I'm Mexican after all. You should understand, because some of you are Belgian, and surrealism is part of our bread and butter. And yes, as I said, I have a few of these alignments. Some of these materials you may just recognize from your life here. That one's that we use as well. And I work it out that I often do make these pieces when I'm feeling a little bit like I need to, like my head is a little bit all over the place, and I want to kind of settle. I wanted to stop shaking, and I think, okay, how can I just make something that's really straightforward, simple, left to right, orderly, alignment, progression, rhyme, I don't know. And sometimes it's a kind of mood that I expect from these works. Very rarely they become, more abundant in the elements like this one. Mostly it's just 3 or 4. And often there is something that unfolds, and I like to display that somehow. You see something on the floor, then you see it standing on its side, and that reveals, of course, something that didn't. So how do I deal with that? Well, maybe differently, and maybe that something suddenly climbs onto the wall. Yeah, recently I made this work in a museum in Switzerland, in St. Gallen, and and I thought of it as a diagram. I often think of my works as in their kind of line drawing nature, let's say, like a diagram. Of course, these rocks are hanging on the wall in a way that they feel like they define gravity, just as effortlessly as the leaning bits of pipe. And then, as I said, rocks and consumer goods are given the same treatment. This one's called Privacy Standards. And here I used a previous work that I had made, the quick standards, and then these privacy screens that I once saw in a pharmacy in Los Angeles where I was living. I think they were used to conceal little babies as they were given their jabs or something, but there was something really that really appealed to me about the structure and the lightness and the color and the fact that they are this portable boundary. So I went online and I ordered the 3 colors that were available, and it took me really long to work out what I could do with them. Because of course I thought whatever happens has to happen at this height, because this is exactly what they're made for, is to conceal something at this height. But then again, whatever that was had either to come from below, in which case it would probably collide with all the legs that were already in this beautiful dance, or had to be hanging from the ceiling. I normally really don't like sculptures that hang from monofilament and are supposed to be hovering, but they're in fact suspended by a string. So I decided to continue with the sticks. and think of the concavity and the convexity and the concealment and the exposure that these objects provide. And the last three images are again of a piece that is in exhibition at Wheels. And it's called Untitled CH-CHN. And yeah, it's got Swiss banknotes that I really love because they're all different colors. I don't think I ever made a work with banknotes in the United States because they're all green. I find that very boring. So anyway, please take a moment. If you have already some questions, I'd really like for this to be a conversation rather than a talk. Thank you for your attention. If there are any images that you'd like me to go back to, I can do it. Okay?
Gabriel, thank you. This was very enlightening. There was something you said about the last work, about the Swiss banknotes, and colorful nature, and then about the alignment works. So you talked about ordering principles. And the fact that you made them as maybe a personal drive to order. So you call the ordering principle as one of the driving gestures of your practice. But the last remark you made about the banknotes, you also talked about aesthetic preferences. So how do they balance each other out? Because there is, which I particularly like about your work, is that there is a very determined sensibility in choosing. You don't pick any sort of material. You're very precise.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about?
I think it's a very good question, because I think a lot of when I look and I try to assess what I'm doing, it's very often in that fine line between intuition or the pre-rational and the very strictly rational. I think choice is something we should never repress as creators. There are certain schools of thought that have taught us to maybe that you know, choice and emotion are like ingredients of romanticism that we must be suspicious of. I don't think that way. I'm not saying that I favor melodrama, but I'm saying that, you know, each one of us has something that the other one doesn't. And that very often boils down to, you know, I like potato soup and you like pea soup. And that is something that is worth, you know, making your career on. However, I don't think that just following what could seem to be purely aesthetic choice is enough. That's why I say I often find myself in that fine line between just trying to follow my intuition, but also ordering principles. I think they are amongst the building blocks of reason. You know, when you try to make sense of the world around you, you often start with the basics. You know, what's big and what's small, and what's to my left and what's to my right, and what can I reach and what I cannot, what can I count. Often my work is about that. And in fact, the exhibition at Wheels has that somewhat at the core of its narrative. I am out there because, as I said in the beginning, I want to convey meaning. I want to understand what life is about. And quite often it starts from the start, let's say. That's also why a lot of my works have a little bit that almost simple, didactic way of addressing, you know, like the alignment or the grids. Or I tend to like exhibitions in grids, for instance, like not create, you know, funny angles or enveloping environments, but rather think more in terms of grids. That's probably because I like this. I like to think that I'm trying to order intuition. You know.
Start from intuition, which I fully believe. There's a moment in the exhibition that with every person I talk about that visited it, there's a moment that it sort of directs back at you as a visitor. You think this is about me. Because you put material culture at the center through your work, while it's not the subject. And there's a fine line between taking up material culture as a subject and addressing it. Can you tell us something about how you deal with the fact that many of your colleagues take up subject matter first, they want to address something, and then they'll translate it into work? You seem to work the other way around.
Yeah.
And in the show like yours in Brussels, you get to the point that you find that the work is addressing an incredible lot, but not out of purpose, or at least not full frontal.
Well, I think you said it yourself. There's nothing that I'd like to add to that. I only ever speak in first person singular. I speak for myself, of course, in the hope that the audience will see themselves there, because art is an act of communication. Although I'm not speaking for anyone else, I would hope that, you know, that token that I'm creating is just that. It's a token that will allow us to have an exchange. But I'm not speaking for anyone else. I never use or imply the first person plural. I never say we with my work. But I also don't say you, like you should do, or but I would hope that in my first person singular is exactly where you can see, as you said, you can see yourself there. Also, you know, I'm an avid spectator of exhibitions, and when I feel that coming from the work is when I most engage. You know, when I see something and I realize this was, you know, this was made for me. This is all about me, but it's not pointing a finger at me. That's exactly when I feel I can go in. Whereas, as you say, when art is made with that as a subject matter, then I think there's another there are other axes of voices, like the you and the they and the we and the I get somehow mixed. I don't work that way.
Maybe also have a question. I was wondering, in the beginning of your lecture, you mentioned that drawing is practically the base of your practice. And then at the same time you show images which indeed you recognize from daily life, from everyday situations. And you feel it not simple, but it feels like you walk, you see something, and immediately you have this idea. It's quite a direct practice. Of course, it's not. So I was wondering, maybe you could say something about this drawing as a base for your practice. Like, how does your studio practice look like, for example?
Well, my studio practice is somewhat traditional. I turn up in the studio and I open my book. This one here. I've had the same format for the last 30 years, I think. And it probably looks like the book of a lot of you. But this is where I go back to every day. And very often I bring out the books of like 5 years ago, and I decant all of what I feel is somehow still active and open into the new book. And it's kind of it's quite conventional. It's a discipline that, in the old-fashioned sense of the word. Thankfully, I took liking in drawing as my way of giving form to thought. Of course, later came the computer and the camera also to take notes, let's say. But this is something that I always like to go back to. And it is something I picked up from my days in school as well. This is also why I said at the beginning of I don't know how it works here with regards to drawing classes. Is there, or are there a few teachers that somewhat want to imbue this discipline or not? I don't know. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I was wondering, maybe is there a link between more anthropomorphic sculptures that seem to refer to generic bodies, like, and the more sexualized ones? Like, basically, what's your relation to sex? Are they sexy, or are they sexual, or are they just playful? I'm hoping it's the first two.
I don't think I can answer that because I don't make them thinking, oh, now this is a sexy work. I'm getting turned on, I don't. Yeah, I mean, maybe I was tongue-in-cheek, thinking that I was getting away with making a piece about demography, and the condom being, something that you can think of as linked to population control. But in a sense, it was more that I wanted to inflate something, and I was thinking of the viscosity of it, and I don't know. I mean, a lot of the work is very tactile, and it's not up to me to say when tactile is playful and when it becomes more erotic, or when I'm, just having fun and when I'm masturbating. I don't know where the line is. I guess it's up to you to also interpret that. Huh? Sorry, you. Yeah.
I want to touch upon some things you said. First of all, you said that artists have to travel these days because the world is so globalized. Then you also spoke about how you always make art out of your own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You also use different materials from where you live. For example, the dividers you saw in California or the Swiss banknotes. I just wanted to ask, do you see yourself as a global citizen then, or do you still resonate a lot with your Mexican heritage?
That's a good question. I didn't actually say that you have to travel all the time. But I said that it almost feels that in order to be called an artist, you have to be on the move all the time. This idea of the artist being a bohemian that's locked in a studio seems to be completely not of this day and age. That said, I'm sure that there are amazing artists that rarely ever leave the studio. It's just, I think for many other disciplines, not just for art, being on the move seems to be the only way to keep your business alive, And yes, identity is, of course, in this seemingly flattened, globalized world, still a question that is very interesting. I've been in Brussels since 2003. I move a lot. And there's not a day that I don't wake up thinking, I'm from Mexico City. But what does that mean? I think that is the question. What does that mean? I think borders are so permeable now that what is it that we carry with ourselves through life from the place that we grow up in, is more of a constant question rather than a, banner that you can wrap yourself with. No? I guess that's a question that you have asked yourself many times and tried to, it's more of an open question, People ask me, why are you in Brussels? Why are you in Mexico? I don't have a satisfying answer to that. We often need distance to assess or ask ourselves who we are. So thankfully, being an artist is a profession that you can mostly carry with you anywhere you go. So I think that is, in fact, a great privilege. And the fact that we also break linguistic barriers. I mean, if this was a room of writers in a Belgian school, we would mostly only be speaking either French or Flemish or none of the two, but it would be kind of language-based. But we can go anywhere we like. And I think, again, that's a great privilege. That doesn't mean the question is less necessary. But I guess we could be in much worse circumstances to be asking it.
It's probably a very silly one, but very silly question. But you talk about how intuition steers you, and elaborating on Anthony's question about picking certain materials. Maybe that might be anecdotal, but can you remember a moment when you picked something and then you said no? So that your first intuition thought that you could use something and then you said no?
It happens sometimes, not just the once, but maybe I can answer the other way around. When I feel that it's a yes, it's most often when it's something that feels to be open or incomplete. And then I can make it mine and make it better somehow. I mean, this is a bit of a romantic idea, but I'm totally for it. The feeling that by being an artist, you can improve the world. And this very often is as simple as that needs me, because it needs to be green on the side. So you pick it up and you paint it green and then you give it back. Very often that you look at is complete and you may love it, but there's nothing you can do for it. So then it's no. I'd rather leave it as it is. On a bad day, of course, no comes from failure. I pick it up because I thought I could do something for it and I fail. So that's a harder no, Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? Yeah?
You said you were interested in conveying meaning and understandings.
Uh-huh.
You're doing this way.
Uh-huh.
Do you think it's working? Do you understand more than when you were younger?
Yes. Do I understand enough? Not yet, but I guess another privilege of being an artist is that it's not really a system of like an empirical system like science with hypotheses and questions and answers and demonstrations. We follow a protocol that is in some way similar to science, but thankfully we don't, or most of us won't aim at the dead end that it would be to have an answer. But you just want to keep the question open and relevant, of course. Relevant in the sense that, when you go to an exhibition and you feel that there's way too many more questions than the artist actually has, an assertive statement about, I often just leave. I think, I've got nothing to cling on to here. But that doesn't mean that one has to have, answers or understand more and more and more. I guess, yes, we all do. Experience is I guess, good in that sense. But I also choose to be an artist also because I want to keep it open.
Any more questions? Maybe we, yeah?
A lot of your sculptures are also kind of functional.
Uh-huh.
But do you see yourself then also as a designer, or are you a designer of furniture or like things that can be used?
Uh-huh.
So you're not into design, you don't really see it.
I'm really what?
Like for me, it's like I was thinking if you're starting a sculpture,
Uh-huh.
do you start with the idea of making it functional or not at all?
No. Many times the meditation is about a certain function. But I don't make a table that I feel that you should use. That would be one of the differences between being a designer and being an artist. No, of course it's my meditation on a table, and it may say something about what a table is or what a table may be, but I'm not saying you should use this table. And function is for sure something that I'm always asking myself, because things are made to work. Things around us are made to work. Some work better than others, and they are the embodiment of so many things, of course invention and the development of a technology and sexual desire and administration and policy and politics and so many things. Anywhere you look, the shoes we wear, the equipment we use is just the embodiment of so many aspects that, of course, it's a wealth of things to look at, of stories that you can dig into any given object. And sure enough, technique and function are amongst the ones that are really interest me the most.
Any more questions? No? Then the ones that have questions but don't dare to raise their hands can maybe ask them in the bar, or maybe do it now. So I think this is it for tonight, and please put your hands together one more time.
Thank you.